Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Nick Drinks. I'm your host, Nick Britsky. You can see we are still in our quarantine basement in our, what do you call this? A fallout shelter, if you will.
Nick Drinks.
And we are joined by two very important people. We are joined by Stephen Beam, who is the head distiller at Limestone Branch Distilling in Kentucky. And we also have my friend Will Woodington from Bonded in Bottles, who is an expert when it comes to all things brown and spirits. And we are going to taste through this lovely selection of products that you see in front of you. We have the Yellowstone Select, we have the Minor Case Rye, and we have a brand new gin that I'm still learning the name of, Bowling Burch. So I am excited. I have only tasted the Yellowstone because we actually had Stephen on our podcast last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
It's been a bit, yeah. And I haven't tried the rye, I haven't tried the gin, so this is great. So Stephen, why don't you say a quick hi and talk a little bit about what you do?
Hi, Steve Beam from Limestone Branch Distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. And we're a small distillery in Lebanon, Kentucky. We do a couple barrels a day. We do bourbon and rye, and then we just added a gin. So we don't have a wide portfolio. We, just kind of focus on what we do. And of course, my name is Beam, would go back with all the way back to 1795 in Kentucky with the Beams. I'm seventh generation. And then on my mother's side, which actually where Yellowstone comes from, was the Dance Distilling Company. So J.W. Dant. So.
Wow, and it's funny because I feel like distilleries start with vodka. You just skipped that. You skipped over the vodka, the gin, and the brown stuff. You just said, no, I'm going to start with the brown stuff, and we'll work up to the gin. And then, are you ever going to do a vodka?
No vodka, but we did when we first started. We did moonshine. So we did,
okay, all right, yeah.
We did do the clear moonshine and lots of different flavors. So we had a wide product line, but when we always made bourbon from day one, and so when we were able to have enough bourbon, then we went out of the moonshine business as well. So.
Interesting. All right, let's bring Will into this. Will has a fantastic Instagram and Facebook channel. If you haven't checked it out, it is Bonded in Bottles. He joined me for a video also last year, and I think I did goof up earlier this year. It's fairly recently, and I did goof up his name, so I'm going to be very careful going Bonded in Bottles. Will, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, I understand it's a tongue twister, but you caught yourself, so good work on you, Nick. But no, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure here to be able to talk with someone like Stephen, and again, join up with you again, Nick. We have a lot of fun. So I'm a super big fan of everything that I've tasted from Limestone Branch, and I'm ready to kind of dive into it.
And I'm a jack of all trades when it comes to spirits. I know just a little bit to get me in trouble with everything. So I really wanted to bring in a specialist here. And that is where we can bring in Will to show off his knowledge. If you haven't checked out his Instagram channel, check that out. He does some great videos. He does some great reviews, and really worth your time to go look at that.
Thank you.
So Stephen, why don't you talk us through, do you want to start with Yellowstone and work our way back, or what do you think would be a good tasting order?
Yeah, I think if we start with Yellowstone and come back, the gin, you don't want that before the brown spirits, I don't believe so.
And coming from Michigan State, which has a ton of packaging majors, I just now noticed these little tags with this rubber top on here. These are super cool. I do not know when this started, but the combination of having the rubber attached to the little tag is like pretty slick.
Yeah, the neckers are always a hard way to get them to work right, so they can be a real pain.
Well, and what's great about this is it has some grip to it. So you have the elasticity, you have some grippies on there. I mean, this is a proper necker.
Oh, thanks. And the talking about the packaging, the label that we use, the Yellowstone is the original logo from 1872, and the waterfall was the original. Very similar. Yellowstone had great packaging, so we really didn't have to go too far. Just update it to meet the current TTB codes. So.
And was Yellowstone rebooted? Was this something that went on hiatus and you guys brought back recently?
Well, Yellowstone's been around since 1872.
Okay.
Been continuously sold since 1872. So even in Prohibition, Brown-Forman was licensed, the brand was licensed to Brown-Forman, and it was sold during Prohibition. And then in 1993, United Distillers merged with Guinness, became Diageo. It was owned by United Distillers at that time, and they sold off all the bourbon brands except for Bullet. And that's when Luxco acquired Yellowstone. They shut down the distillery in 1993, but it stayed on the shelf continuously. And then in 2015, we partnered with Luxco to bring the brand back into the family and to Limestone, and that's when I became in charge of the brand. So.
And Will, has this always been in Michigan?
As far as I know, there may have been a period of time, maybe in the beginning once the brand was relaunched, but ever since I can remember, I've seen Yellowstone on the shelf. So
good. That's why we brought Will, the specialist, because I don't know any better. So, yeah.
Michigan's one of our best states. I love Michigan, and I come up often, and I love it, especially in the summertime. Wintertime, I end up there some, but it's not. I'm not a winter person, so.
We don't blame you for that, right? But yeah, just in regards to the bottle, Stephen, I'm a huge fan of the design and the label, and just the callback to the original label and stuff like that is just super cool. To be able to see how it looked back then is awesome.
Yeah, and it's very similar. The bottle, the shape of the bottle, everything. Like I said, they did a great job throughout the time. The Yellowstone Limited Edition is a black label that they did, and so that came out in the 60s or 70s, and it's a great label too. So we didn't have to do much to it.
Yeah, this one's awesome too. I love it.
Yeah, that's it.
Excellent. All right, well, let's taste through this. Talk about the mash bill on here.
So this is a blend of ours and Source. Our whiskey is 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malt. And we use a white corn, which is a little milder in that corn flavor. I wanted to use a corn, and we've used the heirloom corn since 2010 when we opened, and it's a white, either Trucker's Favorite or Boone County White are the two varieties that we use, and so it's a blend of those two. 93 proof. We tasted or used everything from 100, a little over 100 to 90, and 93 is what I felt that was best right out of the bottle, neat as, and that's what we went. So.
And kudos for being able to know basically the strain of the corn that you have. I feel like it's rare that I get that kind of in-depth mash bill where you're actually going all the way down to say it's heritage, it's this, it's that. What do you think that brings to the flavor that maybe just a kind of generic commodity corn might not have?
Have a little bit more flavor, I believe. When I first graduated college was when I first started looking into the distilling business. And at that time, it was just really insurmountable with the regulations, and then there was no internet. So, advertising, it was just really what I could do. So I kind of shelved the idea, but in the research, I had read this article right after Prohibition. It was in, I believe, a paper from Bardstown, and it was, and she was complaining that the whiskey had no flavor. And then she went on to complain about the corn, and she said, well, cornbread doesn't have any flavor anymore. It was in the 30s. So when I determined at that time that I was going to use a heritage corn, and because as a bred corn, one of the things in breeding corn is you breed disease resistance and
yield.
And yield,
yeah,
and flavor, especially in a dent corn for cattle feed and things aren't as, flavor wasn't as an important part of the whole thing. So for me, using an heirloom corn was very important.
And I think one of the best comparisons you can find in the grocery store is growing a tomato versus buying a tomato. The difference between a homegrown tomato is pretty crazy compared to your generic grocery store tomato. So knowing that you guys have kind of taken the extra step on this is great. Will, give me some thoughts and maybe give me some tasting for this guy.
Yeah, so to me, it's just like there's a wonderful balance on the nose here. There's like a good balance of like sweetness, but a little bit of that rye spice that I get, which is really, really pleasant. I mean, I can stick my nose all the way in there. You don't get burned by alcohol or anything like that. So it's a sign of good things to come, I think, on the palate for sure.
46.5, so we got a little bit of firepower on here, and it doesn't smell like that at all.
No, for sure. Stephen, I was going to ask you too. What's the entry proof on the barrels? How much do they have to get?
Okay. Well, the source, of course, is a 125, which is the standard in Kentucky. Our barrels that we put in are between 103 and 109. Proof.
Nice.
And
so that's not a ton of watering down you have to do to get to where you're at.
Right, and that comes from, I have some barrel records from barrel reports from J.W. Dant back in the late 1800s, and all of his barrels were right around 100 proof, a little bit over 100 proof. So I'm thinking that they were barreling pretty close to 100 proof and bottling at 100 proof. And depending on where you're at in the barrel house, sometimes you can lose a little proof. So I didn't want to go below 100.
Mm-hmm.
I want to do a bottled in bond, and so we just went in a little bit higher. Usually it's 103, 107, or 109.
Gotcha. Very cool. Speaking of Dan, I did have a question for you before I forget. So I don't know if I followed it right, but is it accurate that the Beam family married into the Dent family?
With my family, my grandmother was a Dant, and of course, so that my mom's family were Dants, and then my dad's were the Beams, and then on my dad's side, my grandmother's sister, she married into the Dant family as well. So it was kind of all through there. So the Beams and the Dants have collaborated on whiskey for a long time.
That's awesome. I had no idea about that. Very cool.
Neat. Are the family reunions, do you guys talk shop, or do you keep it pretty separate?
A lot of the Beams aren't in the business anymore, and then the Dants, they are just now getting back into the business. And so we talk shop, but then there's a lot of the Beam reunion is a typical, family reunion with egg toss and three-legged races and all the barbecues and things. So it's a pretty good time. It's quite large, and it's hosted over at Jim D.
Is it potluck?
Yeah. Yeah. They have meat, and then everybody brings a dish. So yes.
All right. So what did you bring last year?
What did I bring last year?
This is what I want to know about.
Gosh,
I'd be doing potluck with whiskey.
I did bring a bottle, but I think I brought an apple pie.
Oh, good call.
I usually bring desserts because I'm a dessert guy. So.
All right. So first impressions, or probably your 40th impressions, Will?
Right. Yeah. So it's the palate is kind of replicating what I'm smelling. I get that sweetness from that corn, rye spice on the back end, some caramels, a little bit of vanilla on here. It's a super, super easy drinker for me, for sure.
It's important that, excuse me, the blend is a 4 and 7 year old blend. So there's 4-year-old barrels and 7-year-old barrels. 4-year-old barrels, you get lighter notes of the barrel, so you get some of that vanilla and the caramels, and then you get the corn notes and the green notes still come through. And then the 7 gives it a little bit more depth, and then the finish as well.
Yeah, it's an all around really nice. It's got character to it. It's easy drinking. Yeah, it's great.
I'm not going to be as intelligent with my tasting as Will, but I do like a little bit of the heat that I'm getting here because I feel like it really helps travel some of the flavors and really makes for a full palate experience on here. And I don't know the price point on here. I feel like it's pretty reasonable, but I feel like, and if this is blasphemy, I apologize, that this could actually make some really solid cocktails because it has the backbone to push through some of those other flavors.
No, absolutely. And, you know, this is our flagship, and, you know, you can have it neat or on the rocks, but it stands up nicely in a cocktail. And that's, again, that 4-year-old really helps give it that. I was just to say, I'm happy to hear Will say that the nose follows through on the palate, because that's one of the things that I always say as well. You know, sometimes you can have a great nose and then you're a little bit disappointed what's in the glass, but I think that you know, ours come through beautifully.
Yeah, it's not just a shiny package with a nice scent. It's the whole thing, you know. So yeah, I'm really happy with that bottle. I think here, Nick, MSRP is $39.99.
Okay, so I would not feel bad mixing that. I mean, that is, you know, probably kind of the higher end of what I'd mix with, but you know, certainly a very affordable price.
It makes a great old fashioned.
I bet. Yeah.
It has some citrus notes. This really works well in an old fashioned.
And the rye sings nicely too. I definitely get a good spice note on it, but it's not overpowering. Speaking of rye, segue. Ooh, that was good. Let's talk about the minor case. So I have zero experience with this, but I saw Sherry Cask and was instantly super geeked. Talk a little bit about how long this has been about. I'm sure I just have no idea. And you know, what kind of background is on this.
Yeah, so minor case we introduced about 4 years ago.
Okay.
3 years ago. As long as this mustache has been around. How long? So I started, my minor case was my great grandfather, and he had this big mustache. So when we launched the brand, I started growing mustache, you know, in his honor, and it's now getting to where his was. So, but he had a distillery. Jim Beam's first cousin. He had his own distillery in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he was the patriarch of that generation, the oldest of all the cousins. And so he really held the family together. He's one that started the family reunions and things. So, but he sold out right before Prohibition. He actually sold the distillery to family at Yellowstone. And the distillery on the Yellowstone label was actually Minor Case Beam's Distillery before it was the Yellowstone Distillery. But so he had been kind of forgotten. So when we wanted to do a new whiskey that we were going to introduce, I wanted to pay tribute to him. And so we took some of the packaging that he had, which was the insignia. You can see the MCB there. It was on all of his labels. And then we just wanted to do a throwback bottle, which comes with the flask. And I think that's a beautiful package as well. This is a 2-year Indiana rye that we finish in sherry casks in Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah, the sherry is actually a cream sherry. It's from Myers Winery in Cincinnati, which is the oldest winery and largest winery in Ohio. It has it was John F. Kennedy's favorite cream after dinner drink, so it was served in the White House in his administration, and it really complements the rye. The cream sherry is a little sweeter, and but it makes a really nice finish for the rye. Especially it's a 2-year rye, so it's a little bit younger. But once you finish it in that sherry cask, it really you'd never guess that it was 2 years.
I love that story. When you look at you know, if you know your geography, Cincinnati is like right there on Kentucky. So they share an airport to an extent, right?
Yeah, actually, the Cincinnati airport's in Kentucky.
So I mean, it's right on top of each other. So being able to partner up with them and to have that heritage for being the oldest winery is great. I love sherry. Cream sherry, not as much, but I do love sherry.
But it works
And-
really well with the rye.
Totally, and that I'm sure that sweetness actually helps, and it's not going to blow you out of the water because the barrel's not going to be just saturated with it.
Right.
So-
The interesting thing about the barrel is they use bourbon barrels to age the sherry in. So just again use those extra barrels with extra sherry barrels to then do the.
That's neat.
It comes full circle.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Quick question. Minor Case is a very unique name. Is there anything to that? Because I didn't realize that was someone's name. I thought that was just like a brand name, you know?
Yeah. No, it was his name, and we're not 100% sure. Believe that Case is a family name. And then I kind of believe that Minor might be either a friend's surname or as well, because I think it's two surnames. Because there are some people with the surname Minor and Case in the area. But it's something I always ask my dad. I said, Dad, didn't anybody ever think to ask where it came from? You know? Yes, we did. He went by MC mostly.
Yeah.
So this is a very mellow, nuanced nose.
Yeah, you get the sherry comes across in the nose for sure.
I mean, compared to the bourbon, was like, hello, I'm here. Whereas the rye is a little more like kind of sneaking through the back door.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's got a nice soft nose. So as far as the mash bill on this, so it's 100% rye then, right?
No.
Oh, it's not. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's 51% rye,
Whoa.
Oh, really legal.
45% corn, and 4% malt.
Okay.
So it's that, more Kentucky and Maryland style rye.
And what's the age on this guy?
It's a 2-year rye, and then it's spent about 8 months in sherry casks.
Wow.
It doesn't drink like a 2-year-old rye.
Yeah.
The high corn content and the sherry cask will give it some sweetness and help mellow the spiciness out of the rye.
Yeah, I think my favorite ryes, Steve, are ones that are just teetering, like anywhere from 51% to low 60s. Anything like a Whistle Pig, let's say, that's more closer to that 100% full rye. It's just not my style. It's just too earthy for me. So I think this is going to provide a really great balance. Let's see.
We do at the distillery, and I think Michigan might have bought a barrel or two of this, but the 100% malted rye that we do in 15-gallon barrels. And it's the best-selling of all of our little bottles that we sell at the distillery. The 100% malted is the favorite. And
Boy, the American malts are really coming out. I feel like over the past 3 years, I've seen so many of them being released.
I don't really have any interest in doing a single malt of barley, but the malted rye was interesting, and it has that softer feel than just a punch you in the face rye from the malting.
Sure.
Yeah, I'd love to try that. Next time I'm down in Kentucky, I definitely want to stop by and try some of that stuff, because that's interesting. A malted rye, typically you got malted barley, right? Most whiskeys, so a malted rye would be super cool to try.
And we've I've got some, since we do a lot of the bottled and bond will be single barrel. I've got some, bourbon that I've done malted rye rather than the regular rye, and so some different things like that as well.
Cool. So you're saying for the yellow, you're saying you guys are doing a bottle and bond variation?
Yeah, we're going to do a 6-year bottled and bond. Excuse me. A 6-year bottled and bond, and it should be out in about 18 months or so.
Okay.
We'll have enough that we can get out to
Uh, so is that going to be a separate ideation from your limited edition stuff then? That's going to be like a third product you're going to add to the Yellowstone lineup then?
We'll have our Yellowstone Select, which will be our flagship, and will always be a blend because we just don't make enough right now. Then we'll have our bottled and bond, and then once a year we'll do the limited edition.
Very cool.
And then the minor case rye, and that's kind of our portfolio, and then we added the gin. So
awesome.
When that bottle and bond comes out, I'll let you know. There's an Instagram channel that'd be really good for that.
Okay. Yeah, it just wasn't ready at 4 years, so I think at 6 it'd be just right.
So that's a great little side quest right there. You're given the power to say, hey, we're not going to make money this year or next year. We're going to wait another year. That's a lot of power right there, and I bet that stresses out some of the marketing folks.
Yeah, it did. But that also, helps with having a partner like Luxco, who has the financial resources to be able to do that, and not pushed, to release something before it's ready.
I think with the whiskey boom that's happening right now, continues to just be strong in the market, that if you guys come out and say, you start even talking about it, people will be patient. That's going to be on their list. I speak from experience. You get the word out there, and then boom, it's on your list. As soon as it comes out, you're going to be hunting for it. So you guys shouldn't have any problem whatsoever, of course, selling that stuff.
Right. And there won't be a lot, honestly, either.
Yeah.
Didn't make a lot, especially in the early years. So.
And you know what? The less you make, the more desirable it becomes, and the faster it sells. So, but it's to your point, Nick. Though it's fascinating to me. That's one fascinating part about whiskey, man. Is every time you put something in a barrel, you're taking a complete risk. Especially if you've got an age statement you want to put on it of 6-7 years. Well, things could change. So that's what I love about it. But that's really cool. You guys are coming out with that. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it is scary. You just try to make the best distillate you can and use the best barrels, and then you have to put it away, and you have to kind of wait and see.
Yep, risky whiskey.
Especially when you're new at it, and you don't have a track record. After like the big guys who've been doing it for so long, they know exactly what you're going to get.
I think that your name obviously carries a lot of leverage. And of course, Luxco being part of that family is big too, because they're obviously a powerhouse. So, yeah.
All right, so Will, I've now sipped on this probably about 3 times. I get something new every time I get it, and I'm falling more in love with this. Give me your tasting notes.
Yeah. So again, following up with that soft nose, like this is a completely, again, followed with another, really smooth drinking whiskey. Most people that do drink rye, or maybe start to dabble into rye, it can be a little bit too spicy for them, a little bit too punchy. The sherry cask finish on this just provides a delicacy over the palate, but you still get a little bit of that rye resonance in the back. Again, I love it because it's just a barely legal rye, so it's right up my alley. But yeah, on the nose, I'm with you, Nick. I'm getting different tastes every time I go back to it. I was even just getting a little bit of black licorice on the nose, just a tinge of it. So it's a really, really good, and to your point, Steve, too, this drinks like it's more than 2 years old, for sure. So
absolutely.
And the sweet notes are very, very, if you're not a sherry fan, don't let that scare you. It is just subtle in the background. Like I'm imagining this kind of like forest walk where you're just getting these light woods, a little bit of floral, a little bit of sweetness, but it's all so subtle and nuanced. Really the wood is kind of what sticks on the bottom and kind of like anchors everything for me. But this is like borderline aperitif, not from a sweetness standpoint, but just from a subtlety and like something you want to hang out and chew a little bit before dinner.
It was very important for me. I didn't want to just do a sherry bomb.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to mask the rye whiskey. I just wanted to complement it, and come down from that, the young of it, so being a young.
8 months is nothing to shake a stick at. That's a decent amount of time.
Right, and then we do some that are a little bit shorter, and then we do a blend of that so that we can keep a consistent profile.
Okay, Will, any last thoughts on this before we move on?
No, I'm just super satisfied with it. I'd love to make Manhattan with this. And it's great on its own, just neat. But again, this is another product where I'm like, okay, this could be like a pinnacle here for doing mixed drinks as well. So
yeah, it makes a great Manhattan. As a matter of fact, we used to have a hang tag that said made the best damn Manhattan. It makes a great Manhattan because the sherry works really well with the vermouth, and you can actually scale the vermouth back just a little bit.
My brain goes to Sazerac because I like a high corn rye when I do a Sazerac, and that's where I would put this guy.
Yeah. As well, again, with the bottle, the design of this, I love it too, because it just looks like it came, like you could find this, like if you time
under your house. Yeah.
You know, the 20s or something like that. It's just got the inscription in the glass. I love that, man. I love when you take the history into consideration and try and emulate what a bottle would have looked like back in the day.
And money. Like, this is not a cheap bottle.
No, I would assume not. Yeah.
This is pretty standard when you look at just the glass.
Yeah.
But like this guy, someone worked on this one, and you probably had to get a couple approvals for the higher ups on this guy.
You know, and when we first did it, we did not have this silk screen.
Mm-hmm.
So
you don't have the silk screen, Will.
Yeah.
Right?
It was beautiful and very classy, but you couldn't see it from behind the bar. And I would go in liquor stores and know they had our product and walk around and couldn't find it. So while it was a beautiful package, we needed something to make it pop. So then we had it silk screen. It's just a little bit off white, and it looks a lot like the old barback bottles that were porcelain.
Yeah. Well, segue to another beautiful bottle is we're looking at the, give me the name one more time, Bowling and Birch. And I only know one other brand that uses these kind of snap tops right here. And it happens to be a Michigan brand, which is the, I think it's Oma's Sherry or Oma's Cherry Liqueur. So I'm pretty geeked that you use this. This reminds me of like kind of a canning bottle you'd find in your grandmother's basement.
Right. Well, when I went looking for a bottle, I wanted an apothecary type bottle. Yep. And then when I found this one with the top, I was just like, yeah, that's it. So. And again, like I said, it's a what I call New World gin. When I was in London, they were calling it a Western gin, but a Western style. There's 17 different botanicals, some of which grow naturally on the site, and some we grow there. It has things like mulberry and blackberry, honeysuckle. Yeah, those are three that I grow on the site, and there's another one I'm forgetting.
Steve, real quick question for you as well, not to get ahead, but what is the typical MSRP on this?
That is a good question.
Sorry to stop you.
I'm not sure because every state is so different. I've just not, but it's
give us your gut, and I'll put the Michigan
right
number at the bottom.
Right around $40, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit less.
Okay.
Right.
Another beautiful bottle. Yeah. Love this. On the back, the whatever you want to call that. Yeah, the botanicals on the back.
So you're thinking $40 and you're getting a 48% gin. So you're getting a nice strong gin, which, you know, as a mixer is awesome because you're getting those flavors that are going to pop through there. And if you're not a gin drinker, you know, if you've had the Tanquerays and you've had the London Dries, those really high juniper gins, you might have been turned off by gin. Going with an American gin, those flavors, while still there, are dialed down, and typically the citrus and other flavors are bumped up. The nose on this is very, very mild, and you are not getting that juniper bomb. So this could be a little gateway gin if you're not a gin fan.
We hear that all the time in the tasting room at the distillery. You know, people will say, "Oh, I hate gin," no, but then they'll really like this because it is not just like chewing on a juniper bush. But
is that so? this is where my expertise starts to fall off. So when you guys relate a strong juniper deal, is that like the Christmas tree kind of taste you get?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes sense, because that is, to your guys' point, like the biggest turnoff for a lot of people is that Christmas tree sort of flavor. And I'm telling you right now, I mean, this nose is just exploding with just vibrant notes.
Yeah, we work hard to get that nose right. When I did it on the bench top, which we started with like just a little 3-liter bench top to run experiments through, I was able to by keeping the honeysuckle and the hibiscus leaves and some of the like lemon verbena, the lighter flavors up a little bit. They came through really nicely like this. If they were down lower with the other botanicals, they would come out more of a cooked. So I tell people it's like the difference between strawberry jam and a fresh strawberry. You know, you get that cooked or you get that real fresh. And I wanted that real fresh note.
Yeah.
We do that with 2 different gin baskets in the still. We have an upper gin basket and a lower gin basket. And the upper gin basket has all the lighter botanicals, and then the lower gin basket has the heavier, like the citrus and the junipers and things like cardamom, things like that. And so when those vapors first start coming off, those aromatics come right over, and it doesn't get them cooked.
So there are a couple different ways to do infusion. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Will. I just wanted to address that because that was my next question. Are you distilling it with the botanicals in the product? Are you putting it in a basket, which is what you guys are doing? You're actually doing multiple layers of baskets, which is awesome. Yes. Or you can add it after the fact, after it's already been distilled. So right. I'm a big fan of this because you're just getting the vapors and the essence. You're really making
everything
craft.
Is in a vapor chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not at all familiar, unfortunately, with gin distillation. But yeah, that sounds like it's really good.
And it's a London dry style. I say that because we do have a rotovap, which is a still that we can, a small still that we run under a vacuum and which is a lower temperature, and we do the essence of each different botanical. So if there's any variation in, so we do these at 30-gallon runs at a time, so very small, and then we put them in a 250-gallon batch. And so to keep those 250-gallon batches consistent, if we need to add a little bit of one of the components, we keep those so that we can adjust the flavor just right.
So kids, don't try this at home. You can buy a rotovap on eBay. The Chinese ones go for about $6,000. So it's a little bit of money, but you could be illegally distilling your scientific hooch at your own home.
And if you have Prime, it'll be there in 2 days. Oh, I love it. Thanks for teaching me a little bit about gin distillation.
So talk a little bit about your history, because before, you have a landscape architecture background, you have a landscaping background.
Right.
Why don't you talk about it before I put words in your face?
Yeah. So like I said, I grew up interested in horticulture. I had a greenhouse at the home when I was like 13. So I grew ornamental plants. I actually sold them when I was in high school, for money. That was my job. And then I went away to school, became a landscape architect, went to, I had a design build firm. And so I was in Atlanta, Georgia for quite a while. And then I went to Miami, Florida. And I was in Miami for a while.
And my roommate was a landscape architect, and he had the markers and the drawings and everything everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of all-nighters and drawing and yeah.
So how did that prepare you for, selecting 17 botanicals is a decent amount of botanicals. Talk about how you selected those and kind of how are you bringing in your younger knowledge to select some of those things?
Well, like the citrus, for example, we don't just use the citrus as in, we use bitter orange, sweet orange, and lemon peel. But then we also use the lemongrass and lemon verbena. So we get layers of flavor of citrus rather than just, from one type of citrus. And just with the native plants, with like the honeysuckle and the mulberry and black cherry, that was the one I was looking for earlier.
So, Will, not being you do like gin, but it's, being a little more of a whiskey guy. Talk about, sell this to the whiskey guys out there. What do you think?
This again, for being a whiskey guy, I'm used to a certain profile and enjoy a certain profile typically of scents, aromas, taste, whatever you want to call it. So when I do switch to something like this, and especially since I'm trying it neat, the one thing that I wouldn't prefer is if it was more of the heavy juniper, Christmas tree tasting, flavor. That does not have this at all. Now, I haven't tasted this yet, but just down the nose is exploding with just a great amount of citrus and herbal kind of scents, and it's super enjoyable. So the thing is, with a whiskey drinker, and Steve, you can probably attest to this, you're not going to go outside in Florida right now, and I'm not going to go outside in Michigan here in 94-degree weather and take out a nice dram of whiskey, right? I'm going to take out a mixed drink. And what am I going to go for? I'm going to go for something that has flavor and character and out of a clear spirit. Tequila has some, some barrel-aged tequila, but gin just explodes with flavor typically. You can really taste that when you make a cocktail. So for me, again, I have to taste this yet, but this is already coming through with a lot of great scents on it. So for a whiskey drinker, you're looking for all these unique identifiable scents and flavor profiles. This already has that on first scent. So.
And the citrus, just like Steve is probably going for, it is layered. It is a ton of citrus. There is the juniper in there, but it is really partnered with the citrus. On the nose, it feels like lots and lots of layers of citrus with some juniper back there.
Yeah.
And when you drink it, it's a very rounded, I'm imagining like this citrus ball, this like orange ball kind of wrapped around the juniper. So it's a really pleasant, full gin. I like this neat. I don't know if I would mix with this as I sully your two other brands with cocktails.
Nick, I just tasted it. I was just going to say the same thing. Call me crazy, but I would sip this neat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I prefer it neat as well. It's actually very delicate gin. Those aromatics are very delicate, and if you use the traditional measurements in a gin and tonic, you're going to cover up those really nice light botanicals. So I'll use, if I make a cocktail with it, I'll put with some seltzer maybe just a splash of tonic, but generally it's just neat with a little ice. In the summertime, ice is good.
Man, that is delicious. Yeah, I'm tasting all those citrus notes way up front, and it is just delightful. I mean, you don't get, again, like if you're weary of gin because of that Christmas tree taste, juniper taste, this is just awesome because it's just, it's much more citrus forward than your typical gin.
I'm also going to call you a liar. There's no way this is 48%.
Yeah,
this is 20 tops.
There's advertising laws out there, Steve, and we're coming for you.
and you have to be careful because it will sneak up on you. I can tell you that from experience.
You mentioned tonic, and not all tonics are the same. Most of the mass market tonics, the Canadian Dries, the Fagos, those are very, very full of flavor, full of sugar. If you did want to do a tonic with this, go for a more craft tonic, something like a Fever Tree. It's going to pull back the sugar. It's going to have a little more of the aromatics, and you're not going to blow out your palate. But I don't know if I'd mix with this.
Yeah, that's my thing, man. Like, it's not very often I taste a clear spirit just on its own, right? But this I can literally sip. And if I did do it, to your point, Nick, I would mix this with something that's more mild because you're going to want all these flavors shining in your drink.
Maybe a gin old fashioned, Give it
Yeah.
some sugar and a hit of bitters, and you know, treat it like a whiskey.
Yeah.
And if you use some of the bitter, like maybe a rhubarb bitter or orange bitters, things like that would be nice as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just accentuate that citrusness.
Yeah.
Citrusness is a word, right?
Yes, it is. We've made it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Well, this has been an absolute treat going through such a wide variety of products. When we first talked, I thought we were just going to go through the Yellowstone, and I was pleased as punch to do that. And then to have a couple of these show up and get them over to Will has been an absolute pleasure. Stephen, thank you so much. If people want to find more about these products, where can people find them?
In Michigan, there.
Well, online. Like, where can people find online information?
About us? Okay. Limestonebranch.com, and we're in Facebook, Instagram, online, all those.
Perfect. Will, thank you so much. Give a shout out for your channel and how people can find out more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me, Nick. Thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time to be with us and talk about your products. They're all awesome. But yeah, my page is called Bonded in Bottles on Instagram. And basically, I'm just a massive whiskey nerd, and you can find out more information on new products, reviews, pictures, stories, you know, all that kind of stuff on everything whiskey. So.
And Will's a hunter, so will find the cool bottles, the unique bottles, the ones that I'm too lazy to leave my house for. So go find them on his channel because he does the research, he does the legwork, and he has them.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate that.
Thanks so much. If you want to find more about me, you can check me out at nickdrinks.com, youtube.com/nickdrinks, and nickdrinks all spelled out for our social media channels. Thanks so much. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. Cheers.